Today I am challenging myself to create unique home decor using mirrors. And for this first one, I absolutely love the look of these living botanical wall art pieces. Now mine will not be living, but we're creating that same look. Mirrors can be pricey, so I headed to the thrift store to see what mirrors I could find inexpensively. As I was on the hunt for a circular mirror, unfortunately I didn't come across one, but I did however find this beautiful oval mirror for just $15. I love that it was a wooden frame and the mirror had a beveled edge, so this guy came home with me. Next, I picked up several different moss and green botanical options, and let me just say, Michaels is absolutely killing it right now when it comes to realistic looking florals. I was blown away by their selection, and the fact that they felt a little bit more rubbery instead of that typical plastic or vinyl type material florals are usually made out of. They were also on sale, buy two, get three free on the day that I went. I have a real wandering Jew in my home, and it is my favorite houseplant that I own. This one looks so lifelike. If you aren't into caring for plants but love that look, head to your local Michaels and pick up some of their spring picks. You won't regret it. Back home, I need to get my mirror prepped and ready. Filming mirrors can be a little bit tricky, so I did my best not to do as many overhead shots so you aren't staring at my lighting for this entire project. But you can see there are a few little nicks in the mirror frame. That's okay, I'm going to paint over it. With those botanicals, you won't see that. I debated keeping that filigree detail on top of the mirror, but ultimately decided it didn't go with the aesthetic of this project and removed it. I thought it was only held on with these few staples on the back, but then I realized there was something else keeping it on as well, and it wasn't glue. I had to get out my little saw to cut through it, and it ended up being wood dowels. So I put this piece in my craft stash to be used on a future project. Next, I took a 60 grit sanding sponge to scuff up that varnish on the wood frame and prep it for painting. I'm also going to apply my Dixie Belle Slick Stick as a primer to make sure my paint adheres to this surface. I often get questions about the primers that I use, especially when I use my gesso. Now, gesso is a paint primer that is meant to be used in conjunction with acrylic paints. I also use it under spray paint, where Slick Stick is a chalk paint primer. I have used other paints over top of Slick Stick as well. It all just depends on the type of paint that you're using for your project. Slick Stick dries super fast. I was ready to add paint only a minute or two after I had finished applying the primer. And I'm using Black Velvet by DIY Paint. I love this black because it is soft and not super dark. I find painting to be so relaxing. It is one of my favorite crafting activities. Normally I wouldn't take the time to tape off a project like this while painting. I have a pretty steady hand and paint easily wipes right off of a mirror, especially DIY paint, which is water soluble. So I really regretted that I had taped this one off. Not only did the tape keep getting stuck underneath of that frame, I could see the old frame underneath of it through that bevel in the mirror, and it looked like there was like white that someone had painted over previously. So I ended up touching that up off camera with a detail brush to get underneath of the frame. Finally, we can get to the fun part of this project. I laid out all of my moss and botanical options that I bought. This is way more than what you need, but I wanted to make sure that I had enough variety. A project like this is all about creating depth and dimension. There are many different design options to choose from here. For my mirror, I wanted the botanicals to look like a crescent, or more of a backwards crescent, I guess. So I added a small amount of the moss to the top right side and continued to add a little more to make it thicker as I went down. And I'm adding the moss just using hot glue. I know this could break down over time, it's not a permanent adhesive, but this also makes it easy if I ever want to remove the moss in the future. You guys would be so proud of me. I actually double checked where the hooks are on the back of my mirror and they are facing in the correct direction.
Yay!
Like I said, this type of project is all about layering in different varieties of moss and greenery. I would add the moss, then layer in some ferns, add another color of moss, then some succulent looking plants, some more greenery. This is why I bought a bunch of different picks for this project. Some I bought I didn't end up using at all. I really liked that fern and succulent look with the moss and stuck mostly with those. At the bottom of the frame, I mirrored the top where it starts to taper into nothing. I added in a few finishing touches, and that's it for this one. I think it is stunning, and I only spent about $30 on it, which is a massive savings compared to the $300 average that I've seen on Etsy. This mirror project isn't exactly my style. It leans a little bit more glam for my liking, but I still think it's beautiful. I found this mirror while thrifting at Goodwill months ago, and it originally came from IKEA. I'm laying it face down or mirror side down on top of some foam core board and tracing right around that edge. Next, I'm using my flexible ruler to measure out 1/2 of an inch from that mirror line. I do this every inch or so all the way around the outline because I want to create a second oval that's 1/2 an inch wider. This was the easiest way that I thought to do it, and it actually worked out so that the hole in my roller was right at that 1/2 inch mark, so I would place the original mirror line right through the center of that hole to help make sure this was even all the way around. Then I cut out that larger oval with a box cutter, and I also cut along that original oval line to create a frame. What an attractive angle this is. I'm adding that foam board frame over the top of my existing mirror. This was a pretty tight fit. I thought I was going to have to cut a slit in that foam core board at first, but it ended up fitting. Now I'm going to attach that foam to the back of the mirror using super glue. I use this Starbond super glue, which has an accelerator, and that accelerator helps to dry the super glue instantly for an immediate hold. I ended up covering the face of the mirror for this next part so that you're not viewing my lights the whole time. I know that gets super distracting and hard to tell what exactly you're looking at, and I also sanded the edges of the foam board to smooth that out for our later step. Alright, now we can get into the fun part. I have these clear crushed glass pieces, as well as some vintage gold glass, and I'm going to add these all along that foam core board frame. I'm using tacky glue here and going section by section, applying the glue and then sprinkling on that clear glass first. This can make a bit of a mess. It might be helpful to put a plate or something under the mirror to catch any pieces that fall for easy cleanup. I didn't do that here, but I do that for the gold glass, which is much smaller. Once I had the whole frame filled in, I let that dry, and then I went back and filled in any areas that were missing glass, or when I had flipped it over, they had fallen off. This was mostly on the very edges. Now I'm going to take the gold pieces and add them all along the edge of the foam, which will provide a little border, but also cover up that raw edge. I totally wasn't thinking when I started this and was trying to sprinkle the gold on just like I did the clear glass. It clearly wasn't going that well and was just making a complete mess until I realized to pour the gold glass onto the plate and add the glue to the edge and then dip it into the glass. And this worked out so much better. Next, I'm taking some Rub and Buff to go over that black stand portion. I wasn't sure which color would match the gold glass the best, so I did a little bit of a test on the back. I have European gold, antique gold, and gold leaf. I think the antique gold worked the best and I went with that one. I do like the black frame, and I wonder if I should have just left it that way. You guys will have to let me know what you think, but I applied the Rub 'n Buff with a soft makeup brush, which helps it to spread further. And that's it for this one. It was a super easy project. It's perfect. It's a little vanity top mirror while putting on makeup in the morning. If I had a separate area to do that in my home, that's absolutely how I would use this. Maybe in my next house. I saw this mirror decor piece while scrolling through Pinterest and wanted to try and recreate it for myself. I grabbed these supplies from my stash, garden hooks from the Dollar Tree. These particular ones didn't work out, but we'll get into that. A Dollar Tree mirror, embroidery hoop, a book ring, and jar lid that will fit a small Dollar Tree pillar candle. So like I said, this hook wasn't going to work. The hook part was facing the wrong direction in order to get that look of the Pinterest version. So I looked through my craft supplies and around my garage to come up with something else. I ended up taking this metal handle off of a paint bucket. I wish this was a little bit thicker of a metal, but it worked out well enough. I took my pliers and started shaping it to look like the hook from my inspiration. It needed to come straight out from the mirror and then hook over in front with another small hook to hold that candle hoop. The hook at the end to attach this to the paint can was already perfect. I didn't need to do anything to that section. Next, I'm making the candle section by gluing the jar lid to the bottom of an embroidery hoop. You want to use the portion that's the solid circle without the metal piece, so that inside piece of the embroidery hoop, and I'm using super glue to attach the lid on. I love using this Starbond super glue with the accelerator. I often get questions about the accelerator and what exactly it is. This will instantly dry the glue for an immediate hold. You don't have to use it, but it certainly helps speed things along. And this product is always linked in my description box. Then I did the same thing with that book ring. I've had these from another project on hand, but you can find a pack of 5 or so at the Dollar Tree. I don't want to rely on just that glue to hold up a candle, so I also wrapped some black string around the center for extra support. I didn't want the metal hook sticking out behind the mirror, so I drilled a little hole into that frame so the metal would sit inside of it. Now I can take everything out to the garage to spray paint it black. The mirror frame was already black, but it had a little bit of a sheen to it, so I painted that as well so all of the pieces match. And Luna knocks the camera over. Puppies are just the best. Nice. All that's left to do is assemble the parts. I placed the metal hook in that divot that I had created, and then I used my super glue again to hold it in place. I also glued it down to the back for additional stability. And then I added these little wood pieces on either side, just so the metal isn't the only thing sitting up against the wall. This also gave me something to attach a sawtooth hanger onto, so we can put this piece up on the wall, and that's it for this project. For this project, I wanted to recreate the wave mirror that I've seen on my Pinterest feed and on other social media platforms. I found it on Amazon for $150, and this project came with a lot of struggles, so I saved it for last. For this project, I had some of these really large 4-foot by 8-foot cardboard sheets.
I pick these up for when I'm selling some larger items on my website and I don't necessarily have a box the size that's going to fit it. And we're also going to use one of these wall mirrors. This is from Walmart. These are really inexpensive, $7 mirror. And I'm gonna just basically use the mirror itself. I'm gonna create a frame using this cardboard. I'm gonna first trace out just the exact size of my mirror. Hi buddy, I know you wanna play. So that I can get an idea of where my frame part needs to go. We had to distract the dogs with some treats because they just keep getting in the way. All right, so next I need to figure out kind of what the design is that I wanna draw around, and I kind of want to make this a little wave looking. And I can go back and fine tune it later. I just want to get like the general idea for now. Oh, Luna, get your bone, girl.
Once I had the shape drawn out, I cut along my line with a box cutter. Here's what my shape is looking like. I was a little bit nervous that you would still be able to see some of that mirror frame the way that I had cut this out. So I put the mirror under it, and sure enough, you could see that black frame. I wanted to utilize as much of that mirror surface that I could, so I figured out how to get that frame off. This, of course, was a struggle and took a little while considering it's not exactly meant to be taken apart like this. In the end, it only gave me about another inch of that mirror surface. There was still some gaps where the cardboard was larger than the mirror, but we'll fix that in the next step.
So to get that cloud mirror look, I have this Loctite foam, which I actually used a couple of months ago in a Halloween video, and I had wanted to use it on some other projects, this being something that I had in mind. Now, the video that I watched on a girl who made this, she used 2 cans of the foam. I only have 1 on hand, so we're gonna see how far this gets us, but we might need to run out and grab another can.
One can got me so close to covering the cardboard. I did have some left over from my Halloween video and was able to cover that last little section. But the foam wasn't as thick as I had wanted it, so I did go back out and pick up some more.
I got 2 new cans of the spray foam just in case. Don't want to run out again. And then I also just want to lay my mirror out to make sure that any of those gaps that we had seen previously are all closed in. So I still have a couple little areas to fill in. You can see right along the bottom here, you can see just a little bit. And then also along the top here, a little bit right here. And then at the very top, you can see a little bit. But for the most part, all of those gaps we were seeing all got filled in, which is great.
I started out filling in just where I knew there were still gaps, but then decided to fill in the entire thing one more time. And I'm so glad I picked up 2 more cans because I ended up using both. All right, once all of the foam was dry, it's time to shape it. I'm using a serrated kitchen knife to cut through the foam and start smoothing it out. I wanted to do this little by little. You can always cut away more of that foam, but you cannot add it back on. I will say there was a big difference between the 2 different foams and the way that they cut. Interestingly, I prefer the Dollar General one. It was so much easier to cut through and shape, where the Home Depot foam was so spongy, it would like cut off in chunks rather than being carvable. Next came the absolutely, without a doubt, the most frustrating part of this project. I'm going to cover all of the foam now with joint compound to smooth it out, and again, I didn't have enough and had to run out to the store to get another container. But for the first layer of joint compound, it's kind of like a crumb coat. You spread it on knowing it's still going to look like crap, but it's basically just filling in all those imperfections, and it's going to give you a little bit flatter of a base. all of that loose foam was balling up with the joint compound, similar to how cake does with icing. The inside of the foam that would be right up against the mirror was a frustrating section. I didn't want to carve that with the knife and smooth it out because I was afraid the gaps would come back if I accidentally took too much away. So this section was lumpy and bumpy, which I tried to smooth out and fill in with the joint compound. Next, after 2 coats of the joint compound, I'm taking an 80 grit sanding sponge to smooth it out. This project ended up being so much back and forth of adding joint compound and sanding it smooth, adding the joint compound, sanding it smooth. I spent over a week doing this, and in the end, I feel like it could have looked better. My perfectionism could have spent a whole other week doing the same thing to get it smoother, but at some point I just had to say enough is enough. Finally, after accepting that this thing was never going to get perfectly smooth, I moved on to painting, where I also ran into yet another debacle. I grabbed a black paint that I had on hand, the color that I thought I had painted my faux fireplace mantle with, because I loved that it wasn't a super deep dark black. Well, it turns out that wasn't the same color, but not only was the color too gray, the sheen from the satin finish didn't look right on this particular project.
Okay, so big surprise, I don't like the color. I don't like the shade of the black. I put on what I thought was the color I'd painted my fireplace in this Dark Secret by Bear. Well, this is in a satin finish, so first of all, this isn't the color. This was the color I didn't like on my fireplace because it was too much of a gray tone black and not quite deep enough for what I was looking for. Don't like it on this because, again, it leans a little bit too gray, but also that shine. I don't like the shine on this. It's just not right for this project at all. Not the look that I'm going for. So then I went over it with this flat black from Rust-Oleum to tone down. I was hoping it was gonna cover up that satin sheen. While this, while it's a very deep black, also not really what I wanted, it is not flat. It is still extremely shiny. So then I'm like, okay, what else am I going to do if this flat paint isn't working? So I grabbed my flat black primer spray paint and I tested a little section instead of like going over the whole thing because my can, I don't have a full can here. It's almost empty actually. So that worked. That toned it down, made it flat. So I went after work today, I picked up a can. This is paint and primer, so hopefully it's gonna work the same. This was all that they had. They didn't have the exact same flat black primer. So I'm gonna go over the whole thing with this.
I had to do multiple coats of the spray paint to cover up the sheen, but eventually I got it to work. All that's left to do is attach the mirror, so I'm using E6000 to do this. I applied it directly on the mirror and then I let it dry overnight, and that's it for this project. While there are so many things that I would have done differently if I were to redo this project, I think it turned out okay.